everybody. Welcome to the show this morning. My name is Jennifer Quinn. I go by JennyQ. I am here. It's actually quite an honor to be here to have a quick little chat with Jim Dodson. He's doing some amazing things, helping cyclists be safe and also live their best life. Now, who would expect an attorney to have that as his mission? But that's what he does. So without further ado, it's my pleasure and honor to bring on Jim Dodson, the Florida bike guy. Hello, welcome this morning, Jim.
Morning, Jenny. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, it's rainy in Florida, but I'm excited to be on with you.
Rainy in Florida. How often does that happen?
It happens a lot in the summer, but this is one of those patterns where it's happening in the morning. It's kind of affecting my ability to get out and ride.
Oh, well, that's never good. Right? Yeah. How often do you ride personally?
I ride, well, of course I'm working, so I ride 3 days a week. I normally try to get 2 rides in during the week, and then we ride on the weekends as well.
Okay, very good. So one thing that I just want to do really quick before we dive into talking about all the things that make your practice so unique, I want to give a few shout outs. I see we have some live viewers. Welcome to the live viewers. So I want to say good morning to Jerry and hello to Paul. And if you're watching live, go ahead and leave a comment so that we can give you a shout out as well. So Jim, I want to know, because your practice is so specific, and you work with cyclists. How did that come to be? How did it come to be that you devoted your practice to working with cyclists?
Well, I've been an injury lawyer for many years. I was historically a mountain biker. My son and I rode mountain bikes all the time throughout the time he was in college, and we took trips together. And in 2011, I got a road bike and started to enjoy road biking and realized there was a need there for a couple of things. Cyclists needed a voice of someone who knew exactly what it's like to ride and therefore could express and understand the mechanics of what happens when you have a crash and something goes wrong. And there was a huge void, in my view, of a safety advocate, someone who's really out there speaking and educating cyclists to understand what they need to do to protect themselves, what they need to do when the unexpected happens, and the steps that they can take before a crash occurs to make sure that they're adequately protected, when these things occur. Bike crashes, like all the other adverse things that happen in life, are kind of random. We never know.
Well, they are random. And so what you've done is, so you actually can speak to the exact problems that cyclists have because you are a cyclist.
Correct. And that actually makes a huge difference. And it makes a big difference to them. I think it makes a big difference to someone who's been injured in a crash to know they're talking to someone who understands what it's like to not be able to ride, who understands how it feels to be surprised on the road, to be threatened on the road, to have a car buzz you too closely, all the things that we put up with on the road day in and day out. Someone who can talk their language. And quite frankly, it helps me, and I could give you some examples of cases where it's made an enormous difference simply because I knew that from a cycling standpoint, the accident could not have occurred the way the police thought it might have. And we were able to entirely flip a case around once, just one case that comes to mind.
Well, you know what? I would actually, and I think the viewers would probably love to hear about the cases because in talking to you, and hearing the stories, like for you, it's just another day at work, right? But for those of us, it's kind of like a little bit like watching CSI, only we know it's like super real. So I'd actually love to hear at least one, if not more, of the stories of how, because of your specific knowledge, you were able to turn it around, like you said.
Well, one case that comes to mind was really a great guy, very experienced cyclist. It was actually a case that wasn't very far from my local area. And he's riding alone, comes to and this is in a residential street, a 30-mile-an-hour quiet neighborhood, cars coming from the opposite direction. And as the cyclist gets to the intersection, the car made a left turn into his path. Of course, he was hit he veered to the right, so he's actually close to the crosswalk area when he gets hit. And all of the debris on his bike, his water bottle, his computer, all that stuff gets thrown onto the road. Of course, the response from the driver was, "I never saw you." And when the police investigated the case, there was a witness, a young guy, a teenager on the opposite corner, who believed that my client was riding from the opposite direction on the sidewalk. And so the police bought his story. You know, typically when you're involved in a cycling accident investigation, so many times the police roll up to the scene, they know it's a bike involved, and they believe that it was a cyclist that was at fault. And now how do we look for evidence to support our conclusion that the cyclist did something wrong? And that's what happened in this case.
Yeah.
The police officer wrote the police report up that the guy was on the sidewalk and came off the sidewalk right into the path of the car as the car turned. That's a totally different case. When I started talking to the adjuster, their position was, our driver did nothing wrong. You came out in front of us. And, you know, because I'm a cyclist, this sidewalk on this road wasn't the typical curve that you would bump down, and nor was it a smooth transition into the road. It was one of those sidewalks that comes to an end. It kind of goes down at 45 degrees and comes back up on the other side.
Right.
So I'm saying to the adjuster, wait a minute, this is a cyclist riding a carbon frame bike. He's going 18 miles an hour. He's got computer. He's got the helmet on. No cyclist is going to ride on a sidewalk and go bumpity up every curve in that neighborhood. It just won't happen.
Uh-huh.
In addition, because I was a prosecutor for many years and really got used to putting together cases based on circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence in many cases is the best evidence because it doesn't depend on someone's memory or observation. It's just like, so when we laid out all of the pattern of where the debris was, and this case had blood on the road, it was just apparent. There's also the impact on the car. It wasn't on the left side where it would have been had he ridden into the path. It was on the right side, consistent with what my client was saying. So when you put all that stuff together, they went from we did nothing wrong to paying us their policy limits, which was pretty substantial.
Wow, for sure. So I can see how, because you understand the pattern of riding and what a cyclist would and wouldn't do, how that would impact the case with just how you could present the facts, right?
Correct. Right.
Yeah. Very powerful. I love that. And so what are some of the other, what's the most unexpected, and it might be the one you just shared with us, but what's the most unexpected outcome of a case that you've handled?
All right. So over the last few years, I've devoted a lot of energy to the cycling community and to building our cycling practice, but it is not all that we do. Obviously, we still represent people who are involved in car crashes and falls and other types of injury cases. And quite frankly, the cycling community, they're more likely to have a car accident or have a family member get injured than they are to have a cycling crash, fortunately. So I'd like people to bear that in mind as they think about who they need to turn to when they get involved in a car accident or some other type of personal injury. So I think some of the most unique cases have occurred kind of outside of the cycling world. We had a lady who parked her car at her bank, went inside and was standing at the teller window when another lady who had walked out of the bank sat in the car, put it in drive instead of reverse, drove all the way over the sidewalk, through the front of the building, and pinned my nice lady against the teller counter. She had substantial injuries. That was unusual. I had a nice lady who was a nail tech sitting in her desk doing her work, and someone ran into the building.
Wow.
We've had, let me think about, we had a cyclist who was riding on a trail and got to the intersection where the trail crossed the road. The cyclist went across the road and got hit by a car. He had no memory of the accident because he had a concussion and he was really knocked unconscious. So he wasn't able to describe what happened, but witnesses described that he went across against the light. In other words, he went against the light, the traffic had the right of way. Police report was written up that way. Our investigator was able to locate, however, a witness and so they were denying the case. We located a witness that was in traffic that the police never found, who said that, wait a minute, the car that caused the crash passed me on the left, drove into the far right lane, and just before the intersection went from the far right lane to the far left lane and nailed your cyclist before he could reach the curb. So Suddenly, we have now liability on this driver who was
Right.
initially denying that they had done anything wrong.
Right.
And that was a pretty substantial case too, because our client had devastating injuries with a lot of big medical bills. It's just this work is it's interesting from the lawyer standpoint, but interesting means someone's been injured and they need help. From the client standpoint.
And, one of the things that's consistent with the cycling cases that you've been talking about this morning so far is the driver always denies responsibility. Have you ever had a case come to you where the driver's like, yeah, it's all me, I totally messed up?
I mean, it can happen. It's not the normal. I tell people all the time, the first thing the driver says in a pedestrian case and the cycling case is, I never saw them. And I think I think they tend to look past us. They're thinking cars, the natural thing for drivers. They're looking for things that are harmful to them.
Right.
And the threat to them is a car. It's not someone on a bicycle or on or walking on foot. It goes into one of the real big basics for what I do in terms of educating cyclists on how to be seen. It's part of our safety and our awareness advocacy.
Well, that's perfect. That's a perfect segue into my very next question. I love it. I was just going to ask you, so to that point, if the cyclists and the pedestrians aren't being seen, what can cyclists do? What's your top 3 tips? Here's what you have to do to make sure you're seen.
All right. Daylight running lights, number 1. You need a very bright light on the front. The data seems to indicate that a pulsing light is more visible than a solid beam.
Okay.
You need a very solid, bright light on the rear. My pet peeve for cycling is someone comes up next to me with a light on the back of their bike, and I can't even tell if it's blinking when I'm sitting next to them in a line. We need to be seen. We need a light that actually can be seen. And I've done a live stream on that, and we've got a report that I have with 6 really good lights, and they range from $40 to $125. And it's a great resource for people on that topic.
And that's on your Facebook page, right?
Pardon me?
People can go find that. That's on your Facebook page.
JimDodsonLaw.com.
Okay.
Go to our bike page. Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the new. A lot of times when I first started cycling, I gradually went just instinctively to wearing fluorescent colors on the upper body.
Okay.
I'm thinking, this is what I need to do to be seen. Well, the data shows that is a help, but it isn't enough.
Okay.
Apparently, we need about a 15 by 10 inch piece of fabric that's a very bright color on the top, typically a neon yellow, green, or orange. But what's really happening in the research is that we need it on our feet. We need it on our knees, on our lower leg, and around our socks and shoes. Because what's happening is it's the movement of the cyclist cranking through with their pedals that identifies with the driver to realize this is a human on a bicycle. And you're much more visible with high visibility material from the knee down than you are, quite frankly, from the waist up. I tend to put it all together. I try to wear it from head to toe. My view is I want every advantage, every opportunity to be seen.
Of course. So you mentioned a square, right? So is there something to be said of having a contrast of the bright versus a dark, the neon versus a dark? Or if you were just head to toe in neon, would that be good?
I haven't seen any data on it. Now, I don't know that there's any data, quite frankly, of one color over the other. Most of the articles that I've read talk about personal preference. I tend to be a bright yellow guy, but a lot of people think bright orange and bright green are just as good. And I think I rely on my instincts about that.
Okay, and I want to clarify. So with you said the lighting needs to be there during the day, during the night. It doesn't matter. Always have the lighting with the flashing.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm not a night rider. Night riders tend to be more commuter people. I know that if I were riding at night, I would have multiple lights, front and rear.
Okay.
Just to be seen, because it gives you the extra, ability to be seen. And I think at night, there's two arguments about that. Unfortunately, someone who's drunk, there's data to show that they're actually visually drawn to a blinking light, oddly enough. So if you live in an urban area, you would consider a running light that's solid to avoid that problem, depending on the time of day that you're riding. So those are just considerations.
Well, that's good information to have. If you have to commute at night on a bike, make sure that you're not attracting the impaired drivers.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to give a shout out again to our live viewers. I see that you're watching live, but I can't give you a shout out unless you leave a comment. It doesn't tell me who's watching. But if you have a question for Jim, we still have some time. Go ahead and post your question and we can get back to it. If you're watching on the replay, leave your question and Jim will come back in and respond via comment. So Jim, I know that you're really involved in the community there in Florida, in the cyclist community and other aspects. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you do that and what impact that your law firm has with the cyclists?
Well, I think I've got a message for cyclists, because coming at it from my perspective as an injury lawyer, I've seen the devastating effects of injuries, and my advocacy for cyclists is kind of to raise the awareness of the things that we can do to up the odds of being seen and avoided. There's a randomness to all of these things that happen. I know someone that was injured and put in a wheelchair a block from her home. I mean, you just never know when the unexpected is going to occur. What we need to do as cyclists is do everything we can to increase the odds that won't happen to us by visibility, choosing the time and place we ride, perhaps what route we're taking. Personally, I like to avoid roads that are 45, 50, 55 mile an hour speed limits. Sometimes when you're on a long ride, you have to take those routes. The data is just so compelling that when something happens at higher speed, the consequences are so much worse. So I talk to people about insuring their bike, insuring themselves personally, about how to be protected against drivers who don't have the right insurance. We talked about visibility, lighting, helmet wear. There's a huge gap in understanding about the importance not only of a helmet, but the technology that's available within the helmet to make it much more safe, the MIPS technology. There's so many people that don't understand that, have never heard of it. And it's just kind of a message that I try to get out everywhere I go. So I take the opportunity to speak at bike clubs, to go to events where we give out our information. We make it available. I do a newsletter every month. I fill it with information that we write. I write myself. I try to make it interesting. I try to make it informative, helpful. And I'm just trying to kind of raise the awareness in the cycling community of all the things that we can do to even the odds against cars, because they always have the greater odds than we do.
Sure, of course. Speaking of the cycling community, is there anything that surprises you about the demographics or the ages or the cyclists that are out there, riding every day?
It's interesting. Most of the clubs that I've been involved with, the demographics are actually older. There are obviously a lot of clubs with younger riders. But the younger riders, a lot of times, will be pickup clubs. There'll be meetups. They'll be riding in groups that they've established on their own through their mutual interest.
Sure.
The big bike clubs that we know around the state tend to be on the older end of the age spectrum. I think it's fascinating to me when I first got into this to realize how long cyclists stay in the game. Ruth down in Sun City, she was riding when she was 90 or 91. I asked her one time, so Ruth, how is it that you're still riding at 91? And she's like, well, I just never quit. At one point in the last few months, I had 4 clients in their 80s in Florida who'd been injured on a bike crash. That's amazing to me and very inspiring.
Very inspiring.
It's inspiring because most of them had ridden for years and never had an incident, of course, another part of the randomness of what happens. But I love the people. I love the sport. I think it's fascinating. Clients in the cycling world are different than our run-of-the-mill injury client, from a car accident or something else. They think differently. Their motivation is different. Our cycling clients, the first question is, how's my bike? Second question is, when can I start riding again? And they're very motivated to get well and get back out there and join their friends and do all the things that they enjoy and that we all enjoy together.
Perfect. I love that. And, I could see how it'd be especially beneficial for your clients that you are a cyclist, because you can totally talk the lingo and you get the motivation of, I want to get well because I got to get back on my bike. If you weren't a cyclist as well, you might be like, hey, slow down, relax, right?
Well, it's interesting because, I remember I had a lady years ago who was a cyclist, and she was riding 225 miles a week. She was injured in a crash, and after the crash, she was only able to ride something like 50 miles a week. The problem for us is to translate that to a claims adjuster who probably has never ridden. And it's like, why would you want to ride 225 miles a week? And 50 miles seems fine to me. So it's sometimes a challenge to convert. That's a significant loss. I mean, her life was totally different, being unable to return to cycling as she knew it. And translating that to a couch potato claims adjuster sitting in a cubicle somewhere can be a challenge.
Right. Without question. We have a comment that just came up from Paul. He said, we love you too, Jim. Thanks for all you do. Thanks, so Paul. That's so nice to hear. And so I'm wondering, with all you do a lot for the cyclists and for the cycling community, but how are most of your clients referred to you?
Well, we have a pretty strong internet presence, but if you look back at in the cycling world, most of the clients come to us through other cyclists, people that are on our newsletter, people that we've met at events, people that know somebody who know me, someone who had a friend that had our newsletter. That's, and we've really begun to kind of deeply penetrate the community of cycling. And I'm always interested in meeting cyclists. If you're a member of a bike club somewhere and we haven't been introduced to you, I'd be happy for you to reach out to us. We do presentations. I'll help you in any way we can. So we're always looking for opportunities to work with cycling clubs and cycling groups and cycling events.
And to your point of, your online presence, you have a huge library of useful informational downloads for different, aspects of cycling and the law and all different things. And people can find that just simply by going to your website.
Yeah, I want to make our website useful. I think the rap, I guess you'd say, for people in my business, it's personal injury lawyers have a bad name. It looks like they're really out for themselves. Client sometimes gets lost in the mix. And we're trying to reverse that whole dynamic to make sure that this is the client first environment, because people know that I'm giving away information before they ever need my services. I want to be the place where they come for a report on how to get the right light, what kind of helmet technology, insurance. I couldn't even tell you all the things we have on our website anymore. There's so much. We've got a ton of downloads, and all that stuff we give away just to make things easier for people to get educated and understand what they're dealing with. We have a lot of information about mistakes people make with their doctor after an injury. And those are pretty common. We have how to buy car insurance and what kind of car insurance you need for your car and for riding a bike. It goes on and on. There's a lot of material on there. And I welcome you to go to our website and peruse it and download anything that you need. And if you find something that we haven't addressed, call me, because we'll provide it.
That's
if there's
cool.
Information you think would be useful to the cycling community, let me know and we will do it. We'll make our best to make that happen.
That's very cool. And your website is?
JimDodsonLaw.com.
Pretty simple.
Just go to our cycling page. It's under cases we take, cycling, and you'll open up the entire cycling page.
Okay, perfect. And there's something else that you do too. You're really passionate about helping people just live a great life even outside of cycling, whatever, right? And so you've put together an ebook that you're offering for free today for people who are watching the video.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and put that up on the screen right now, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I have a lot of interest, and I'm in a mastermind group of lawyers from around the country. I've been in the mastermind for 9 or 10 years. It introduces me to a lot of people, a lot of ways of thinking about things. The guy who runs my mastermind sends out a book every month for us to read or go through that might be of interest. So I've sort of developed this whole mindset about success, living a successful life. I'm not talking financially, in terms of being an interesting person, being a curious person, being someone who wants to do something to change the way I live. If there's something about my life I don't like, take ownership of that and change it. And quite frankly, inspiring stories of people who have done exactly that, or who have overcome an amazing hurdle in their lives. So I started putting together these stories in my newsletter over the last 2 or 3 years, and I saved them, and we just started putting them into this download that's available on the site on Thoughts on Your Best Life. And it's 35 or so stories that I've written on a lot of different topics from that I think you'll find interesting. And quite frankly, I hope it's inspiring.
Awesome. Awesome. That's so great. It's right now on the screen. The link is bit.ly/thoughts on your best life. And on this particular link, it is case sensitive. So make sure that you notate how, which letters are capitalized and which aren't. And we've also put the link in the comment section, so you can just copy and paste it and put that into your browser to grab that book by Jim. So cool. So cool. So Jim, if you could say 3 things that you would really want to make sure that the people who are watching this video get, what would those final thoughts be?
Well, number one, that I think the one thing, if I could change anything in the cycling world, it would be that every cyclist had uninsured motorist coverage on their auto policy. Because if you've been around Jim Dodson at all, you're going to find out quickly that I'm a preacher about uninsured motorists, because it is the one part of your policy that protects you on your bicycle. And I always tell people, don't leave home without $100,000 in uninsured motorists. $250 is better. The most you can get is what I would recommend. I am heartbroken by the number of people who come to me who have been in a crash. The driver had no insurance and they didn't understand their insurance and have no UM. It happened again this week. So that would be the number one thing that I would suggest every cyclist do in Florida. And if it's the one thing that if I could wave a magic wand, that's what I would make happen.
Very good. So that's just number one. That's just it. Just do that and you're golden.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Well, the other thing is being proactive about taking responsibility to be seen. These things about visibility and what have you. And understanding that we have a responsibility on the road as well, that we're all subject to the same rules that cars are when we ride. When we're on the road on a bicycle, we're a car. When we're on a sidewalk, we're a pedestrian. But the rules that we want applied to them apply to us as well. And the clubs that I'm involved in, I'm very impressed with the fact that they make that a very strong component of all their group rides. How the importance of making sure that we stop for stoplights, those kinds of things. That's a big issue, because quite frankly, when you go to the courthouse to pick a jury on a cycling case and you tell the jury panel that's sitting there that we have to choose 6 people from, this is a cycling case. Anybody have any views about cyclists? And it's not good what you hear, because they think that we don't do anything but violate the law and hold them up on the way to get a bagel in the morning on Sundays because they're taking the entire lane. We have to. I'm trying to encourage people to bear that in mind when we're riding out there, to be nice to people, to be friendly, to do what needs to be done as a safe rider. Do expect what we would expect the cars to do for us.
Gosh, those are great tips. Like, those are things that I'm not a cyclist, but I would have never really even thought of those. And so that's really great. We have a couple more comments. I definitely want to give a shout out to Raymond, who said he's not a client, but have talked to Jim on the phone about an accident where a lady backed out of her driveway and hit me. Ouch. And then Tracy said, Jim did a story and video on me. And so very cool. So it's clear that you're involved in the community, that you're really helping people. And how can people reach out to you directly if they have ideas for information they want, or if they have a question that's very specific to their situation and they maybe didn't want to post it here in the comments?
You know, the easiest thing, you can always call the office, but the easiest thing, quite frankly, is to just email me, jim@jimdodsonlaw.com. And I'll respond to my email. If I don't know the answer, I'll get you the answer. And I encourage people, quite frankly, if you have a legal problem and it's not something we do, I'll get you to the right lawyer to the best of my ability. So I want to be that resource for people beyond what we do. And just bear in mind, again, that, you know, you have a greater chance of being hit by a car as a driver than you do on the bike. So keep us in mind when that occurs, and your family and friends as well.
All right. So good, Jim. It has been such a joy to talk to you this morning. Thank you so much for sharing these tips. And people just reach out to Jim. He's there. He's your advocate. And everybody have a great day and be safe. Take care. Bye-bye.
Appreciate your advocacy.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure.